A janitor's mop slides across a polished marble floor, the squeaking sound echoing through the empty Philadelphia office building. The night skyline glitters through floor-to-ceiling windows. Ray Wilson, 42, moves methodically in his faded blue uniform. His weathered hands tell a story of 2 decades wiping away other people's messes. The building's clock reads 2:17 a.m. The empty executive offices loom around him. Diplomas and success trophies mock his existence from behind glass cases. Ray stops, wincing as he stretches his bad knee. He pulls a small inhaler from his pocket, places it carefully in a plastic bag, and tucks it inside his wallet. Not his prescription, his son's. His phone vibrates. A text message from Sarah. Hospital called. Alex's treatment denied again. We need 4,800 by Friday. Ray's calloused fingers hover over the screen. He types, "We'll figure it out." But his face tells a different story. The mailroom door slides open. The night security guard hands Ray a thick envelope with official government seals. Certified letter, somebody important looking for you, Wilson. Ray's confusion turns to disbelief as he reads the envelope. From the estate of Franklin J. Wilson. Voiceover. Ray Wilson spent 20 years of his life cleaning up after others, while his own life was falling apart. Medical bills, mortgage payments, his son's asthma, all piling up like mountains he couldn't climb. Ray tears open the envelope, revealing legal documents and a black and white photograph of a man in a suit, a man who looks eerily like himself, only older. Voiceover. But on November 22nd, exactly 60 years after Kennedy's assassination, Ray received a letter that would change everything. An uncle he'd never met, a former FBI agent, had left him an abandoned farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. Everyone told him to sell it immediately. The scene shifts to Ray pushing open a creaking wooden door. Dust motes dance in shafts of sunlight cutting through boarded windows. The farmhouse interior is frozen in time. 1960s furniture covered in sheets, old photographs on the walls. Voiceover. But when Ray stepped inside, he had no idea he was walking into one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history, and a conspiracy waiting to be uncovered. Ray's boot catches on a loose floorboard. The hollow sound stops him. He kneels down, pulling back a worn rug, revealing floor planks that don't quite match the others. The sound of splintering wood as Ray pries up the board, revealing darkness beneath, and the gleam of metal. The late November wind cuts across the Philadelphia skyline, rattling the windows of Ray Wilson's cramped apartment. Morning light struggles through thin curtains, casting pale rectangles across a dining table covered with past due notices and medical bills. Ray sits at the table, rubbing his temples. 20 years as a building maintenance worker shows in every line of his face. His Marine Corps tattoo peeks out from under his sleeve, a reminder of a different life, a different purpose. Sarah Wilson enters, already dressed in her Navy Medical Corps scrubs, her brown hair tied back. Despite the exhaustion in her eyes, she carries herself with the composure of someone who's handled life or death situations. You were up late, she says, pouring coffee into a travel mug. Double shift. Jacobson's still out sick. Ray shuffles the bills into a pile, hiding the most urgent ones at the bottom. A hollow cough echoes from the bedroom down the hall. Sarah's face tightens. His inhaler's almost empty, she says quietly. And the insurance company is still reviewing our appeal for the new treatment. The coughing continues, followed by the sound of an inhaler's spray. Alex Wilson, 11, appears in the doorway, skinny but tall for his age. Despite his condition, his eyes hold a spark of curiosity that refuses to dim. Morning, he says, his voice slightly hoarse. He's already dressed for school, a book about American history tucked under his arm. Sarah checks her watch. I've got the early shift. Mrs. Hernandez will take you to school today, Alex. She kisses the top of his head, then leans close to Ray's ear. 4,000 by Friday or they'll cancel the treatment slot. The door closes behind her. Ray and Alex sit in silence, the weight of unspoken worry filling the room. Dad? Alex pushes his cereal bowl aside. Are we going to be okay? Ray reaches across the table, squeezing his son's thin shoulder. Always, buddy, always. The doorbell rings. Ray opens it to find a courier holding an official-looking envelope. Raymond James Wilson, the courier asks, checking his digital tablet. That's me. Sign here, please. Certified letter from Hartman, Pearson Associates, Lincoln, Nebraska. Ray signs puzzled. I don't know anyone in Nebraska. The courier shrugs. Just delivering, sir. The envelope is heavy, sealed with multiple stamps and official markings. Ray tears it open at the kitchen table as Alex watches. From the estate of Franklin J. Wilson, reads the letterhead. Ray's brow furrows. Franklin Wilson? I had an Uncle Frank, but I never met him. Mom mentioned him once or twice, said he was some kind of government man who disappeared decades ago. He unfolds the letter, reading aloud. Dear Mr. Wilson, we regret to inform you of the passing of your uncle, Franklin James Wilson. As his sole designated heir, you have been named the beneficiary of his estate, including the property located at 1743 Hemlock Ridge Road, Porters Creek, Pennsylvania. Alex's eyes widen. You inherited a house? Ray keeps reading. The property must be claimed in person within 30 days of this notice. A personal representative will be available to meet you at the property. The letter is signed by Solomon Pierce, attorney at law. Ray stares at the letter, then at a photograph that slipped out. An old black and white image of a stern-faced man in a suit standing in front of a government building. He turns it over. Frank Wilson, Philadelphia, 1964. He looks like you, Dad, Alex says, studying the photo. Ray nods slowly. Yeah, he does. 3 days later, Ray's pickup truck bounces down a rutted Pennsylvania country road. The GPS signal fades in and out as mountains rise around him. The November landscape is barren, trees stripped of leaves, skeletal branches clawing at a steel-gray sky. He checks the address again. The letter's tucked in his jacket pocket, along with the photograph. Something about this whole situation doesn't sit right, but with their financial situation, any inheritance, even a rundown country house, might be the lifeline they need. The truck rounds a bend, and there it sits. A 2-story farmhouse set back from the road. Weathered clapboard siding faded to a ghostly gray. A wraparound porch sags slightly, and several windows are boarded up. The property has clearly been abandoned for years, possibly decades. Ray parks in the overgrown driveway, killing the engine. Silence envelops him. The deep silence of isolation, broken only by the whisper of wind through dead grass. As he steps out of the truck, the cold air hits his lungs. For a moment, he's reminded of his Marine training in the mountains, that same crisp alertness filling his senses. A sleek black sedan is parked at the side of the house. As Ray approaches the porch, the front door opens. A woman in her 60s emerges, straight-backed with silver-streaked dark hair and alert eyes that miss nothing. Mr. Wilson? She calls. I'm Margaret Brennan. I've been managing your uncle's affairs. Ray extends his hand, noticing her firm grip and the way she subtly evaluates him. You have government written all over you, Ms. Brennan, he says. A slight smile crosses her face. Department of Justice, retired. Your uncle had connections. Shall we go inside? The front door groans as she pushes it open. The smell of dust and abandonment fills the air. Sheets cover furniture like ghosts frozen in time. Ray's footsteps echo on hardwood floors that have seen better days. Your uncle purchased this property in 1972, Margaret explains, moving through the house with familiarity. He used it primarily as a safe house and personal archive. No one has lived here full-time since the mid-90s. Safe house? Ray questions. What exactly did my uncle do? Margaret gestures to a wall covered with framed photographs. Ray steps closer, wiping dust from the glass. The images tell a fragmented story, Frank Wilson in various settings through the decades. In one, he stands beside men in suits outside the FBI headquarters. In another, he's seated at a desk covered with files, a younger version of Margaret beside him. Frank served with the Federal Bureau of Investigation from 1955 until his official retirement in 1987, Margaret explains. Although retirement was a flexible concept for your uncle. Ray studies the photographs, trying to reconcile this stranger with the few family stories he remembers. My mother rarely spoke about him, said he was the family ghost. Here one day, gone for years, then suddenly appearing with strange gifts and stranger stories. That sounds like Frank, Margaret says with a hint of fondness. He cultivated distance, even from those he cared about. She leads Ray to a study lined with bookshelves. More photographs, newspaper clippings, and maps cover one wall. Many of the clippings feature headlines about organized crime investigations, political scandals, and one name that appears repeatedly, Blackwell. Who are the Blackwells? Ray asks, examining a photo of a distinguished-looking man shaking hands with what appears to be a senator. Margaret's expression tightens. That's a conversation for after you've seen everything. She moves to a desk, removing a key from her pocket. Frank left explicit instructions about how this was to be handled. Ray follows her through the house, taking in details. The kitchen with its 1970s appliances, a ham radio setup in a small room off the main hallway, a gun cabinet, long emptied. Everything speaks of a life lived in watchful readiness. In the living room, Margaret stops before a faded oriental rug. Help me with this. Together they roll back the heavy wool rug, revealing hardwood flooring underneath. To the untrained eye, it looks uniform, but Ray notices it immediately. A section where the boards don't quite match, where the spacing is slightly off. 20 years of building maintenance, Ray murmurs. You learned to spot the patchwork. Margaret nods appreciatively. Your uncle said you'd have the eye for it. He said that? Sounds like he knew more about me than I knew about him. Margaret doesn't respond, instead pointing to a specific floorboard. Try that one. Ray kneels, running his fingers along the edge of the board. It gives slightly. He presses one end, and the opposite side lifts just enough to get his fingers underneath. The board comes up, revealing a second one fitted perpendicular beneath it. This one has a small metal handle. Ray pulls, and a 3-foot section of flooring rises on hidden hinges, exposing a concrete-lined compartment beneath. Inside sits a flat metal safe with a combination dial. Do you know the combination? Ray asks, looking up at Margaret. She shakes her head. Frank said you would. How would I know it? I never met the man. Margaret shrugs. He was very specific about this. Said, and I quote, Ray will know the numbers that matter. Ray stares at the dial, frustration building. That's helpful. He examines the safe more carefully. It's old, probably from the 1960s, with no manufacturer's name visible. The dial has numbers from 0 to 99. What numbers would matter to me that Frank would know about? Ray wonders aloud. He tries his birthday. Nothing. Sarah's birthday. Nothing. Their anniversary. Still nothing. Then he notices something. A small scratch mark above the dial, barely noticeable. Not a scratch, he realizes, but a tiny engraving. A clock face. Time, Ray murmurs, remembering the photograph. He was standing in front of a government building in that photo from 1964. Margaret watches intently as Ray's mind works. November 26, 1963, he says suddenly. Kennedy's assassination. It was a Friday. He turns the dial, 11:22:63. A soft click, and the safe door loosens. How did you know? Margaret asks. Ray pulls the door open. The letter arrived on November 22nd, 60 years to the day after Kennedy was killed. Too specific to be coincidence. Inside the safe, Ray finds several items. A thick manila envelope, a small wooden box, and a vintage pocket watch. He lifts the watch first. It's silver, heavy in his palm, with intricate engravings on the case. He presses the release, and the cover springs open, revealing not only the watch face but an inscription inside the cover. Time waits not for justice. Next, he opens the wooden box. Inside, nestled in velvet, lies an FBI badge and credentials in the name of Franklin J. Wilson. He left you his badge, Margaret says softly. That was unprecedented. Frank never parted with it, even after retirement. Ray turns to the manila envelope, the largest item. Inside, he finds legal documents, property deeds for 3 buildings in downtown Philadelphia. He flips through them, his eyes widening at the addresses. These are historical buildings in the financial district, he says. They must be worth approximately $47 million in today's market. Margaret finishes for him. They're held by a trust established by your uncle. As his heir, you now control that trust. Ray stares at her, stunned. This can't be right. Why would he leave this to me? A nephew he never met? Margaret doesn't answer directly. Instead, she points to something else in the safe, a small leather journal wedged at the back. Perhaps that will explain. Ray reaches for the journal, feeling its worn cover. The pages are filled with neat, precise handwriting. Dates, observations, names, all documented with meticulous care. Many entries mention the Blackwell family. Others contain references to Eagle Division and the operation. As Ray flips through the journal, he notices a sealed envelope tucked inside the back cover. His name is written on it in faded ink. He breaks the seal and unfolds a letter dated just 6 months ago. Ray, it begins, if you are reading this, then I've passed on, and Margaret has followed my instructions. You don't know me, but I've known about you your entire life. Ray's hands tighten on the paper as he continues reading. Margaret steps away, giving him privacy. The letter is detailed, personal in ways that unsettle him. Frank describes watching Ray grow up from a distance, his pride when Ray joined the Marines, his concern during Ray's deployment, his knowledge of Sarah and Alex. He writes of regrets and necessities, of dangers that forced him to keep his distance. Then, near the end of the letter, a revelation that makes Ray's blood run cold. I've investigated the Blackwell family for over 50 years. What began as a standard organized crime case became something far more sinister, a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of government and business. The Blackwells aren't just criminals, they're kingmakers with blood on their hands. The buildings I've left you aren't just property, they're evidence. In the walls, beneath the floors, behind the facades are records I've spent a lifetime collecting. The Blackwells want them destroyed. Others want them buried forever. I want them exposed. There's a hidden compartment in this safe. Look for the false bottom. What you'll find there will explain everything. Be careful who you trust. The Blackwells have eyes everywhere. With regret and hope, Frank. Ray looks back at the safe, running his fingers along the interior. Sure enough, he feels a seam. Pressing firmly on one corner causes the opposite side to lift slightly. He removes the false bottom to reveal another compartment. Inside lies a single photograph. Frank Wilson standing next to another man in a 1960s FBI office. The second man is labeled in handwriting on the back. James Nelson, protege of Elliot Ness, 1962. But what catches Ray's breath is a second document, a birth certificate. His birth certificate, but with one critical difference. Under father, it doesn't list the man Ray had always known as his father. Instead, it reads, Franklin James Wilson. He wasn't my uncle, Ray says, his voice hollow. He was my father. Margaret's silence confirms what the document reveals. Did you know? Ray demands. She nods once. Frank swore me to secrecy until you found this yourself. Why the deception? Why not just tell me in the letter? Frank believes some truths had to be discovered, not told. Margaret moves to the window, scanning the property with practiced vigilance. He also believed you'd be safer if you made the connection yourself. The Blackwells have been watching this property since Frank's death was announced. As if on cue, the crunch of tires on gravel sounds outside. Margaret immediately steps away from the window. We have company, she says, her tone shifting to urgent professionalism. Put everything back in the safe except the deeds and journal. We need to leave now. Ray gathers the items, questions burning in his mind, but recognizing the command tone in Margaret's voice, the same one he'd heard from officers in combat situations. Who's out there? He asks, securing the safe and lowering the floor panel back into place. Probably Blackwell security, claiming to be doing a property check. They've been circling since the reading of Frank's will. Margaret moves efficiently, replacing the rug. They know Frank left something behind, they don't know what. Ray tucks the deeds and journal inside his jacket. My truck's out front. There's no way to leave without being seen. Margaret leads him to the kitchen, toward a back door. There's a service road through the woods. My car is parked there, force of habit from my justice days. We'll circle back for your truck later. As they slip out the back door, Ray catches sight of two men in dark suits approaching the front porch. Their posture and awareness of sight lines mark them as professionals, former military or law enforcement. Margaret guides Ray through overgrown gardens to a barely visible path cutting into the woods behind the property. They move quickly, Margaret displaying a surprising agility for her age. Frank left instructions for this contingency, she explains as they navigate the dense underbrush. He knew the Blackwells would come looking once the property transferred to you. You still haven't told me who the Blackwells are, Ray says, keeping pace. Victor Blackwell heads one of the oldest criminal enterprises in America, disguised as a legitimate business empire. Shipping, real estate, finance, all built on corruption, extortion, and worse. They reach a narrow dirt track where Margaret's black sedan waits, concealed by branches. She unlocks it with a remote. Frank spent his career building a case against them, but the Blackwells were untouchable. Too many politicians and judges in their pocket. Those buildings you now own? They contain evidence Frank collected over decades. Hidden compartments, secret rooms, damning records. Ray stares at the deeds in his hand with new understanding. So I didn't just inherit property. I inherited his fight. Margaret starts the car. Frank believed you were the only one he could trust to finish what he started. As they pull away, Ray glances in the side mirror. No sign of pursuit yet, but a sense of being watched prickles at the back of his neck. An old combat instinct he hasn't felt in years. Where are we going? He asks. Philadelphia. There's someone you need to meet. Someone who can help you understand what those buildings really contain. The drive back to Philadelphia takes 3 hours, during which Margaret reveals more about Frank Wilson's life and his decades-long investigation. She explains how Frank became obsessed with the Blackwell family after discovering their connection to several high-profile assassinations in the 1960s. Frank believed the Blackwells were financial backers for a covert government program called Eagle Division, an off-books operation conducting domestic surveillance and, when deemed necessary, elimination of threats. Ray struggles to process this information. You're saying my father thought the Blackwells were funding government assassins? Margaret keeps her eyes on the road. Frank had evidence linking the Blackwells to the funding of Eagle Division through shell companies and black budget allocations. He spent decades documenting the money trail. And these buildings I now own contain this evidence? Frank purchased them strategically. Each building housed Blackwell operations at some point. When they moved on, Frank acquired the properties through various fronts. He didn't just want their records, he wanted their infrastructure, their communication systems, their secret meeting rooms. Ray's phone buzzes. A text from Sarah. Where are you? Alex had another attack. We were at the hospital. Call me. His stomach tightens. I need to get to Philadelphia Memorial Hospital. My son. Margaret nods, adjusting their route. Family first. Frank would have agreed. At the hospital, Ray finds Sarah outside the pediatric ICU, her professional composure fraying at the edges. Alex is inside, an oxygen mask covering his face, monitors beeping steadily. What happened? Ray asks, embracing her. His worst attack yet. The school called me at work. Sarah's eyes are red-rimmed but dry. The doctor says he needs the specialized treatment now, not next week. Ray, without insurance approval. Ray squeezes her hand. I may have a solution. He briefly explains the inheritance, showing her the property deeds. Sarah stares at him in disbelief. Buildings worth millions? Ray, this doesn't make sense. Why would an uncle you never met? He wasn't my uncle, Ray says quietly. He was my father. The revelation hangs between them. Sarah's medical training makes her practical. If these are legitimate, we could get a loan against the properties. Pay for Alex's treatment. Margaret, who has been waiting discreetly in the hallway, approaches. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Margaret Brennan. I worked with Frank. May I speak with you both privately? In a small waiting room, Margaret lays out the situation with clinical precision. The Blackwell family will contest the property transfer. They'll claim Frank acquired the buildings illegally. It will tie up the assets in court for years. Sarah's hope visibly deflates. So the inheritance is worthless to us. Not entirely, Margaret counters. Frank established a trust with significant liquid assets to maintain the properties. As trustee, Ray has access to those funds, approximately $300,000 in an account designated for property maintenance and contingencies. Ray looks up sharply. You didn't mention this before. Because accessing the funds creates a digital footprint. Once you tap into that account, the Blackwells will have confirmation of your involvement. Sarah's medical pragmatism takes over. Alex needs the treatment. Whatever risks come with that money, we'll deal with them. Margaret nods. I'll make the arrangements. But understand, once you do this, you're in Frank's world. There's no going back. While Sarah returns to Alex's bedside, Ray and Margaret step out to complete the necessary paperwork for accessing the trust funds. As they walk through the hospital corridor, Ray notices a man in a suit standing near the nurse's station, ostensibly reading a magazine but watching their movements with too much interest. "We're being observed," Ray murmurs. Margaret doesn't turn. Hospital security camera in the corner. The feed is probably being monitored. The Blackwells have access to systems they shouldn't. How did they find us so quickly? They likely flagged your name in the hospital admission system. The Blackwells have people everywhere: law enforcement, healthcare, finance. Ray processes this, the Marine in him automatically assessing threats and exits. So what's our next move? We complete the funds transfer for Alex's treatment. Then we meet our contact, someone who can help you understand what you're really up against. 4 hours later, with Alex stabilized and the specialized treatment scheduled for the following morning, Ray reluctantly leaves Sarah at the hospital. Margaret drives them downtown, the Philadelphia skyline glittering in the early evening light. They park in a public garage and walk several blocks, Margaret leading them through a series of turns that Ray recognizes as counter-surveillance procedure. Finally, they enter an unassuming diner on a side street. The establishment is nearly empty, a few late-afternoon patrons scattered among worn vinyl booths. Margaret scans the room, then nods toward a booth in the back corner. A woman in her mid-60s sits there, a cup of coffee untouched before her. Her silver hair is cut in a practical bob, and though she's dressed casually in a turtleneck and blazer, she carries herself with unmistakable authority. When she looks up, her sharp blue eyes assess Ray with professional interest. "Diana Harper," Margaret introduces as they slide into the booth, "former FBI special agent, counterintelligence division. She worked with Frank for over 30 years. Diana extends her hand. Her grip is firm, her gaze unwavering. "You look just like him," she says simply. "Same eyes, same way of holding your shoulders." Ray feels the weight of her evaluation. "Seems everyone knew my father except me." A sad smile touches Diana's lips. "Frank kept his distance to protect you. The Blackwells didn't hesitate to target families of their investigators." "So I've been told. What I don't understand is why I'm suddenly valuable to his mission. I'm a building maintenance worker, not an FBI agent." Diana glances at Margaret, then back to Ray. "Frank chose you precisely because you're not FBI. The Bureau has been compromised at certain levels. He needed someone outside the system, someone with the right skills but no official connections that could be leveraged against them." "Right skills?" Ray questions. "Marine Corps training, building systems, expertise, problem solving under pressure." Diana ticks off the points on her fingers. "Frank kept tabs on your career. He knew what you were capable of." The waitress approaches. Diana waits until she's gone before continuing. "Those buildings you've inherited are more than property. They're a message and a mission. Each one contains evidence Frank collected about the Blackwells and their connections to Eagle Division." Margaret mentioned Eagle Division, some kind of government hit squad. Diana's expression darkens. "It began as a Cold War counterintelligence unit, off books, deniable operations against Soviet assets. But in the early 1960s, it evolved into something else. Domestic operations, political eliminations disguised as accidents, or the work of lone wolves." Ray leans forward. "Are you saying Frank believed Eagle Division was involved in Kennedy's assassination? With Blackwell funding, he spent his life building the case, gathering evidence, following money trails across decades." Ray absorbs this, the magnitude of what he's inherited becoming clearer. "And now the Blackwells think I have this evidence. They know Frank hid it in those buildings. What they don't know is exactly where or what form it takes. Frank was methodical. The evidence is scattered across all three properties, secured in ways only he fully understood." Diana slides a key across the table. "This opens a safety deposit box at First Commonwealth Bank. Inside is a detailed map of the first building, the Lexington, and instructions for accessing the hidden compartments Frank built into it." Ray pockets the key. "So what's the play here? I find this evidence, and then what? Go to the FBI? The press?" "Neither initially," Diana advises. "The evidence needs to be consolidated and protected first. There are still people loyal to Frank within the Bureau who can help when the time comes, but move too quickly, and the Blackwells will bury everything. As they talk, Ray notices a man enter the diner and take a seat at the counter, the same man he'd spotted at the hospital. Diana follows his gaze. You've picked up a tail. Good awareness. Hospital security cameras, Margaret explains. Diana nods. We need to separate. Margaret, take Ray to Solomon Pierce, Frank's attorney. He has the full documentation on the buildings and trust. As Diana stands to leave, she places a hand on Ray's shoulder. Frank believed in you, said you had his instincts and your mother's heart. We'll be in touch through secure channels. After Diana departs through the kitchen, Ray and Margaret wait several minutes before leaving through the front. The man at the counter makes a show of checking his phone, but Ray notices him speaking quietly into his collar. Not a phone call, but a communication device. Outside, Margaret leads them away from her parked car, instead hailing a taxi. Change of transportation, she explains once they're inside. Solomon's office is in Center City. The taxi winds through Philadelphia's evening traffic. Ray watches the city scroll by, his mind working through everything he's learned. His father was an FBI agent who spent decades investigating a powerful criminal family with connections to a government assassination program. Now that mission has fallen to him, along with properties worth millions, and the danger that comes with them. Why now? Ray asks suddenly. Frank had decades to approach me, to prepare me for this. Why wait until after his death to drop this in my lap? Margaret considers the question. Frank was dying for 2 years before the end. He spent that time arranging everything. The properties, the trust, the evidence. I think he was trying to ensure that when he passed, the case wouldn't die with him. But why not contact me while he was still alive? Train me, explain all this himself? Protection, partly. As long as you were ignorant, you were relatively safe. Margaret pauses. And partly guilt, I think. Frank made a choice decades ago to pursue the Blackwells instead of being a father. Facing you would mean confronting that choice. The taxi pulls up outside a gleaming skyscraper in Center City. Margaret pays the driver in cash and leads Ray through the lobby to a private elevator that requires keycard access. Solomon Pierce is one of Philadelphia's most respected attorneys, she explains as they ascend. He's also one of the few people Frank trusted completely. The elevator opens directly into a luxurious law office. Despite the late hour, a distinguished man in his 70s waits for them, his silver hair and tailored suit projecting authority and old money. Yet there's a sharpness in his eyes that suggests a mind still at its peak. Ray Wilson, he says, extending his hand. I've waited a long time to meet Frank's son. Solomon leads them into a conference room with a spectacular view of the Philadelphia skyline. The 3 buildings Ray now owns are visible in the distance, their windows illuminated in the darkness. I've been Frank's attorney for 43 years, Solomon begins, placing a thick file on the table. In that time, I've helped him acquire those 3 buildings through various shell companies and trusts. On paper, they belong to legitimate business entities. In reality, they belong to you. He pushes the file toward Ray. This contains everything you need to know about the properties. Architectural plans, security systems, maintenance records, tenant information. Ray opens the file, finding detailed blueprints of each building. Certain sections are marked with notations in Frank's handwriting, areas where walls seem thicker than necessary, where electrical systems have unusual configurations, where access panels lead to spaces not shown on the original plans. Frank modified the buildings, Ray observes. Extensively, Solomon confirms. He created hidden rooms, concealed safes, and surveillance systems that the building's occupants know nothing about. The Lexington building is the oldest and contains the most significant alterations. Ray studies the blueprints with professional interest, his experience in building maintenance allowing him to understand what Frank had done. These modifications would have required serious construction. How did he manage that without raising suspicions? Frank was nothing if not patient. The work was done incrementally, over decades, disguised as routine renovations and updates. The Blackwells never realized he was buying the very buildings they had once used for their operations. Solomon opens another file, this one containing financial documents. The Blackwell family's legitimate business, Blackwell Enterprises, is one of the largest private holding companies in the country. Their portfolio includes shipping, real estate, financial services, and technology investments. Their illicit operations, money laundering, political corruption, and worse, are hidden behind this veneer of respectability. Margaret, who has been standing by the window, turns. Tell him about Victor. Solomon's expression hardens. Victor Blackwell is the current head of the family. Former Army intelligence colonel, served in Vietnam in the First Gulf War before taking over the family business in the late 1990s. He's leveraged his military connections to expand the family's influence into government contracting and defense industries. An Eagle Division, Ray asks, a black program that officially doesn't exist. It began during the Cold War as a counterintelligence unit targeting Soviet assets in the United States. After Kennedy's assassination, it evolved into something darker, a deniable asset for eliminating domestic threats to certain power interests. Ray's skepticism shows. This sounds like conspiracy theory territory. Frank thought the same when he first stumbled onto it in 1964, Solomon acknowledges. He was investigating a money laundering operation tied to the Blackwells when he found financial transfers to shell companies linked to former intelligence officers. The deeper he dug, the more connections he found between the Blackwells, Eagle Division, and several high-profile political assassinations. Solomon pulls a photograph from the file, a younger Frank Wilson standing next to another agent. Frank and James Nelson were partners in the early 1960s. Nelson was a protege of Eliot Ness during the final years of Ness's career. When Nelson was killed in what was officially ruled a car accident in 1965, Frank became convinced it was because they were getting too close to the truth about Eagle Division. Ray's phone vibrates, a text from Sarah. Alex stabilized. Treatment scheduled for 9 a.m. When are you coming back? He replies quickly, handling paperwork for the funds. We'll be there by morning. Looking up, Ray addresses Solomon directly. I appreciate the history lesson, but right now my priority is my son. I need to access the trust funds Margaret mentioned for his medical treatment. Solomon nods. Already arranged. The money will be available by morning. He slides a credit card across the table. This is linked to the trust account for immediate expenses. Ray pockets the card, but his expression remains troubled. What happens after Alex's treatment? The Blackwells are already watching us. My family isn't safe. Frank anticipated this, Solomon says. There's a secure apartment in the Lexington building, a residence Frank maintained for situations requiring discretion. Your family can stay there while you decide your next steps. Margaret's phone chimes. She checks it, her expression tightening. We need to move. Our tail from the diner just entered the building. Solomon calmly gathers the files. The service elevator. It connects to the parking garage. As they move quickly toward a hidden panel in the wall that conceals another elevator, Ray's training kicks in. If they followed us here, they'll have the exits covered. Solomon presses a button, revealing the hidden elevator. This building has features similar to the ones Frank installed in your properties. Contingencies for unwanted attention. The elevator descends swiftly to a sub-level not indicated on the public directories. When the doors open, they're in a private garage containing just 3 vehicles: an armored SUV, a discreet sedan, and a motorcycle. Take the sedan, Solomon instructs, handing Ray a key fob. It's registered to a shell company with no connection to me or Frank. The GPS is programmed with the route to the Lexington building's private entrance. Margaret steps toward the motorcycle. I'll create a diversion. Meet you at the Lexington in 1 hour. Before Ray can protest, she's straddling the motorcycle, helmet already in place. Solomon guides Ray to the sedan. The files are in the trunk. Everything you need to understand what Frank was building toward is in there. He places a hand on Ray's shoulder. Frank told me once that when the time came, you'd make the right choice. He believed in you, even from a distance. As Ray slides into the driver's seat, Solomon adds, the Blackwells will come at you from every angle. Be prepared for that. Trust few, verify everything. The garage door opens, and Margaret speeds out on the motorcycle, deliberately visible. Ray waits 30 seconds as instructed, then follows in the sedan, taking a different exit that emerges 2 blocks away. Philadelphia's nighttime streets blur as he navigates according to the GPS, his mind processing everything he's learned. His father wasn't just absent, he was living a double life, building a case against one of the most powerful criminal enterprises in America. possibly linked to the most notorious assassination in American history. And now that burden has fallen to Ray, along with the danger it brings to his family. The Lexington building stands like a sentinel against the Philadelphia night sky, its limestone facade catching the moonlight. The sedan glides into the private underground garage, the door sealing shut behind it with pneumatic precision. Ray Wilson steps out, his marine-honed instincts scanning every corner of the dimly lit space. The weight of Frank's files presses against his side where he's tucked them inside his jacket. A figure emerges from the shadows. Tall, lean, military-bearing, unmistakable despite his 70-plus years. "Mr. Wilson, Howard Jenkins. I served with your father in the Bureau. He asked me to secure this location after his passing. How long have you been waiting here?" 7 months, sir, since Frank's diagnosis became terminal. Jenkins leads Ray to a private elevator concealed behind what appears to be an electrical service panel. The mechanism operates in near silence, rising 12 floors without stopping. When the doors part, they reveal not the expected office space, but a fully equipped apartment. Frank maintained this as his operations center from 1985 onwards. The regular tenants believe this space houses the building's HVAC systems. Security monitors display feeds from throughout the building. A communications center occupies one corner. A wall of filing cabinets stands opposite a workspace with multiple computer terminals. This apartment doesn't appear on any building plans. Frank's renovations were done incrementally, disguised as routine maintenance. Ray moves to the window, gazing out at the Philadelphia skyline. The other two buildings he now owns are visible from this vantage point, forming a triangle in the financial district. "Your family will be secure here. The medical equipment for your son has been installed in the east bedroom. Oxygen, monitoring systems, everything the hospital recommended for his condition." Ray turns sharply. "How do you know about my son's condition?" "Frank kept detailed files on your family's situation. He monitored things from a distance." Authorities. The revelation deepens Ray's unease. His father had been watching silently throughout his life, aware of their struggles, yet never intervening until now. Frank wanted to reach out many times. The files contained dozens of drafted letters he never sent, photographs of you and your family taken from a distance. Why didn't he just tell me the truth in his will? Why this elaborate treasure hunt? Frank believed some truths had to be earned, not given, and he knew the Blackwells would be watching. Every step you take of your own volition creates distance between what they think they know and what's really happening. The secure phone on the desk rings. Jenkins answers, exchanges a few terse words, then turns to Ray. "Margaret has arrived. She's coming up." Minutes later, Margaret emerges from the elevator, having changed from her motorcycle gear into practical clothing. Her manner is brisk, professional. "We should be secure for tonight, but the Blackwells are already mobilizing resources. We need to consolidate our position quickly." Ray sinks into a chair, the weight of the day pressing down on him. "This morning I was a building maintenance worker worried about paying medical bills. Now I'm inheriting a decades-long investigation into a powerful criminal family with connections to government assassinations. And they're watching my every move." Margaret's expression softens slightly. Frank knew he was asking the impossible. "But he also believed you were the only one who could finish this." Jenkins nods in agreement. "Frank said you had the right combination: military training, building systems expertise, and most importantly, a moral compass that couldn't be corrupted. My first responsibility is to my family. Of course, that's why Frank established the trust. Your family's security was his priority too, even if his methods were unconventional." Ray's phone buzzes with a text from Sarah. "Doctor says Alex can be discharged tomorrow morning. Where are we going after?" He replies, "I'll pick you up. We have a secure place to stay. We'll explain everything tomorrow." Ray turns to Jenkins. "What's our next move?" "First, secure your family. Then begin examining the evidence Frank collected. Diana Harper will coordinate with trusted contacts still active within the Bureau. Solomon Pierce will handle legal barriers the Blackwells might throw up. And what am I supposed to do? I'm not an investigator or a lawyer." Jenkins moves to a bookcase and slides it aside, revealing a hidden safe. He enters a combination and removes a thick manila envelope. "Frank left specific instructions about your role. Your building maintenance background gives you something no one else has. the ability to navigate the hidden infrastructure Frank built into these buildings. The evidence is scattered throughout all three properties, secured in compartments and vaults that only someone with your expertise can locate and access. Inside the envelope, Ray finds detailed schematics of the Lexington building, but not the official blueprints. These show modifications, additions, hidden spaces between walls, beneath floors, above ceilings. Frank repurposed existing mechanical chases, elevator shafts, and ventilation systems to create a network of passages and secure rooms. Only someone who understands building infrastructure would recognize the patterns. Ray studies the schematics, his professional interest engaged despite himself. The ingenuity is impressive, using the building's original structural elements to conceal additions that would never appear on official plans. Tomorrow morning, we'll begin the inventory of what's hidden in this building. But tonight, rest. Need it. Dawn breaks over Philadelphia, sunlight refracting through the city's glass towers. Ray stands at the apartment window, coffee in hand, watching the city awaken. He's slept little, his mind racing with questions, with the enormity of what he's inherited. Jenkins enters already dressed and alert despite the early hour. Margaret left to retrieve your family from the hospital. They should arrive within 2 hours. In the meantime, we should begin. He leads Ray to the command center, bringing up building schematics on a large monitor. The Lexington contains 7 primary evidence caches. Frank distributed the material strategically. No single cache contains a complete picture. It was his fail-safe against compromise. The first cache is accessed through a maintenance panel in the north stairwell between the 7th and 8th floors. The panel looks like standard building infrastructure, but a specific sequence of pressure points triggers a hidden mechanism. Ray and Jenkins take the stairs, moving with purpose but avoiding any appearance of urgency that might draw attention. Regular building employees are beginning to arrive, the early shift filtering in through the main lobby. The north stairwell is utilitarian, concrete steps, metal railings, emergency lighting. Jenkins stops between floors, pointing to an electrical panel that appears unremarkable. This is it. Frank's notes indicate the access sequence is based on your date of birth. Ray examines the panel. 4 screws hold the cover in place, but closer inspection reveals they're not standard fasteners. Each can be depressed like a button. Month, day, year, Ray murmurs, pressing the screws in sequence. 1R1, 7-2. A soft click and the panel swings open on concealed hinges, revealing a small cavity behind. Inside sits a waterproof case the size of a thick textbook. Jenkins stands guard while Ray retrieves it. They return to the apartment without incident, where Ray opens the case on the command center table. Inside, a collection of microfiche, labeled meticulously by date, starting in 1962. A small viewing device accompanies them. Frank began gathering evidence the old-fashioned way, Jenkins explains, before digital records, before computers. He maintained the microfiche format for security, immune to digital corruption or hacking. Ray slides the first sheet into the viewer. Financial records fill the screen. Banking transactions, property purchases, shell company formations. All connected to Blackwell Enterprises, all annotated in Frank's precise handwriting. These trace the money, Jenkins observes, following the Blackwell fortune as it moved through legitimate businesses into darker channels. Hours pass as they methodically review the records. A pattern emerges, regular payments from Blackwell shell companies to individuals with military or intelligence backgrounds. Code names appear: Eagle Asset Management, Talon Securities, Raptor Consultants. The bird names were Frank's first clue, Jenkins explains, all connected to funding what would become Eagle Division. The elevator chimes. Margaret enters with Sarah and Alex. The boy looks better than he did at the hospital, though still pale. His eyes widen at the apartment. Whoa, is this where we're staying? It's like something out of a spy movie. Sarah's expression is more reserved, her medical training making her assess their surroundings with a clinical eye. Ray embraces them both, then introduces Jenkins. Howard worked with my father. Your father? Alex looks confused. But Grandpa Wilson died before I was born. It's complicated, buddy. Let's get you settled first. While Margaret shows Sarah and Alex the apartment, Emphasizing the medical equipment available for Alex's condition, Jenkins discreetly secures the microfiche. Ray joins his family once they've been shown to their rooms. Sarah waits until Alex is distracted with exploring before confronting Ray. What's really going on, Ray? This place, these people, nothing about this feels normal. Ray takes her hands, leading her to the living area where they can speak privately. The uncle who left me the inheritance, he wasn't my uncle. He was my biological father. Sarah's expression shifts from confusion to shock. What? How is that possible? Frank Wilson was an FBI agent investigating a powerful criminal family. He discovered something so dangerous that he separated himself from his family, from me, to protect us. The buildings I've inherited aren't just property. They contain evidence he spent his life collecting. Ray explains everything. The Blackwell family, Eagle Division, the assassination connections, the hidden evidence. Sarah listens with increasing disbelief. This sounds insane, Ray. Government assassination programs? Hidden evidence? Secret apartments? I know how it sounds. I didn't believe it either. But I've seen enough now to know Frank wasn't delusional. These people are real, and they're dangerous. Sarah's medical pragmatism takes over. If what you're saying is true, we need to go to the authorities. Frank's evidence suggests certain authorities are compromised. We need to consolidate what he collected before we can trust anyone. Their conversation is interrupted by Jenkins, who appears with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation developing. Diana Harper is on the secure line. In the command center, Diana's voice comes through the speakerphone, tense with urgency. The Blackwells are moving faster than anticipated. James Blackwell has filed legal motions challenging Frank's ownership of all three buildings. They're claiming fraud, arguing Frank used illegally obtained information to acquire the properties. Can they do that, Ray asks? They can tie up the properties in litigation for years. Solomon Pierce's voice joins the call. I'm already preparing counter-filings, but we need to accelerate our timeline. If they get a sympathetic judge to grant an injunction, you could lose access to the buildings. How long do we have? Hours, not days, Diana responds. James Blackwell has connections throughout the Philadelphia court system. He's personally overseeing this operation. Why the sudden urgency, Margaret asks. The Blackwells have known about Frank's death for months. Why push now? A pause on the line. Because they've learned about Ray, Diana finally says. Our sources indicate they've obtained Ray's military records, employment history, family information. They're building a profile, assessing the threat level. Ray exchanges glances with Margaret and Jenkins. So what's our move? The evidence in the Lexington building is the most comprehensive, Diana explains. We need to retrieve the remaining caches immediately before the Blackwells can restrict access. Jenkins brings up the building schematics. 6 more caches to locate. We'll need to move carefully. Regular building operations are in full swing now. Ray turns to Sarah, who has been listening with growing concern. I need to do this, but you and Alex stay here. Jenkins will ensure you're safe. Sarah's face shows her struggle between fear and understanding. Be careful. The next 4 hours are a carefully orchestrated operation. Ray and Margaret access the building's maintenance areas using Ray's knowledge of building systems as their cover. They retrieve 4 more evidence caches, financial records, photographs, audio recordings spanning decades. The 5th cache proves more challenging. Located within a sealed wall cavity adjacent to the building's main electrical room, access requires removing a section of drywall disguised as a standard inspection panel. Ray works efficiently, his years of building maintenance serving him well. Inside the cavity, they find not documents, but a small safe with a digital keypad. Frank's notes don't mention this, Margaret says, consulting a small notebook. Ray studies the keypad. 10 digits, no letters. Probably a date or a number sequence, significant to Frank. He tries his birthday, Frank's birthday, various combinations of significant dates. Nothing works. Wait, Ray says, remembering the pocket watch from the farmhouse safe. Time waits not for justice. He counts the letters in each word, 45337. He enters the sequence. The safe remains locked. What about November 22nd, 1963, Margaret suggests? Kennedy's assassination. Ray enters 11:22 to 63, nothing. Then a realization hits him. Frank wasn't just obsessed with Kennedy's assassination. He was obsessed with proving who was behind it. Ray enters a new sequence. 11/22/63/07. November 22nd, 1963, seventh letter of the alphabet. G. The safe clicks open. G for government? Margaret asks. Or for guilty, Ray responds. Inside the safe, a single audio reel labeled Nelson Final Interview, 10/17/65. Just days before Frank's partner, James Nelson, died in his supposed car accident. They returned to the apartment with this and the final cache, a collection of encrypted computer drives hidden behind a false electrical outlet in the basement mechanical room. In the command center, they gather around a vintage reel-to-reel player that Jenkins has connected to modern recording equipment. The tape hisses to life, scratchy with age but audible. October 17, 1965. Interview with Special Agent James Nelson regarding Blackwell's surveillance operation. Frank's voice, younger but recognizable. Jim, tell me again about what you saw at the Blackwell shipping terminal on November 19, 1963. A second voice, presumably Nelson. 4 men arrived on Blackwell's private yacht. They weren't regular Blackwell associates. They had military bearing. Colonel Victor Blackwell Sr. met them personally, which was unusual. They transferred 3 crates to a vehicle with diplomatic plates, Cuban embassy markings. 3 days before Kennedy's assassination, Frank notes on the tape. The next day, I observed a meeting between Victor Blackwell Sr. and a man I later identified as George Reynolds, Department of Defense, assigned to a classified project codenamed Eagle. And you documented these observations? Yes, surveillance photos, license plate numbers, time logs, all in my official report to ASAC Williams. The report that subsequently disappeared from Bureau files. Yes, Williams said it was deemed not relevant to ongoing investigations and was destroyed per Bureau policy. But that's not standard procedure for field surveillance reports. The tape continues with detailed descriptions of Blackwell operations in the days surrounding Kennedy's assassination. Nelson describes photographing Cuban diplomats meeting with Blackwell associates, money transfers, weapons observed but never officially documented. Then, most damning, on November 24th, I photographed George Reynolds meeting Victor Blackwell at his hunting lodge in Maryland. Reynolds delivered what appeared to be payment, a briefcase that Blackwell didn't open until Reynolds left. Inside was cash, stacked in blocks. I estimated at least $200,000. 2 days after Kennedy's assassination, Frank notes. Yes, and 1 day after Oswald was killed by Ruby. The tape ends with Nelson expressing concern for his safety. They know I've been watching, Frank. Williams pulled me off the Blackwell surveillance yesterday. Said it was orders from above. I don't like it. Frank's voice, final on the tape. Be careful, Jim. Document everything. Trust no one outside our team. Silence fills the command center as the tape ends. Ray looks at the others, the implications sinking in. Frank believed the Blackwells were connected to Kennedy's assassination, he says finally, not just as financial backers of a government program, but as active participants in the conspiracy. Frank spent decades building on Nelson's initial observations, Jenkins confirms. After Nelson's death, Frank became even more determined to expose the truth. Ray's phone buzzes, a text from Diana. Emergency. Solomon's office compromised. Blackwell's obtained court order to freeze all 3 buildings. Security teams en route to secure premises. ETA 30 minutes. They're coming here, Ray says, showing the others the message. We need to move the evidence. Jenkins activates a protocol on the main computer, initiating security lockdown. The private elevator will be disabled. Standard building security won't have access codes to this floor. That won't stop them for long, Margaret warns. Not if they have a court order. We need a distraction, Ray decides. Something to buy us time while we secure the most critical evidence. Jenkins opens a cabinet, revealing an array of equipment that wouldn't be out of place in a spy thriller. Communication devices, surveillance gear, and what appear to be small explosive charges. Frank prepared for this contingency. These are non-lethal diversionary devices. Smoke, sound, light effects. We can trigger building security protocols without causing actual damage. Ray's military training kicks in, mind quickly forming a tactical assessment. The building's fire suppression system, if we trigger it in multiple locations, it would create chaos, force an evacuation. The Blackwell security team would be delayed by the building's emergency protocols. Jenkins nods approvingly. The system can be activated from maintenance panels on 3 floors. I'll handle that, Margaret volunteers. I know the building layouts. Meanwhile, we need to get the most critical evidence out, Ray continues. Sarah and Alex need to be moved to a secondary location as well. Sarah, who has been listening from the doorway, steps forward. I can help. Tell me what to do. Ray is momentarily taken aback by her resolve, then remembers her Navy medical training. She's no stranger to crisis situations. The microfiche, the Nelson tape, and the encrypted drives are our priorities, Jenkins decides. Everything else can be recovered later if necessary. They move with practiced efficiency, Margaret preparing the diversionary tactics, Jenkins securing the critical evidence in specialized containers, Sarah helping Alex gather essentials. Ray studies the building schematics, looking for an exit strategy that avoids the main lobby and garage where the Blackwell security team will likely enter. The service entrance on the east side, he identifies. It connects to the loading dock. Delivery trucks use it throughout the day. There's a maintenance van in the secondary garage, Jenkins confirms. Level B3, separate from the main parking facility. The plan forms quickly. Margaret will trigger the fire suppression systems on multiple floors, creating a building-wide emergency response. During the evacuation, Ray will lead Sarah and Alex out through the service entrance to the waiting van. Jenkins will secure the command center, wiping systems and removing any remaining evidence. As they prepare to move, the building's security system alerts them to an incoming elevator override attempt. They're here early, Jenkins warns, checking the monitors. Main lobby, 6 men in suits claiming to be federal marshals. They're showing paperwork to building security. Time to move, Ray decides. Margaret, trigger the systems. We'll proceed to the service entrance. Margaret nods, taking a maintenance access key and disappearing into the building's utility core. Minutes later, alarms blare throughout the building. The sounds of sprinklers activating echo through the walls, followed by the automated evacuation announcement. Ray leads Sarah and Alex through a concealed door that connects to a maintenance corridor. Jenkins follows with 2 reinforced cases containing the evidence. Stay close, Ray instructs, navigating the narrow passage. This will take us down to the service level without using the main stairwells. The passage descends through the building's infrastructure, past water pipes, electrical conduits, ventilation ducts. Alex's eyes are wide, but to Ray's relief, the boy's breathing remains stable despite the stress. They emerge into a service corridor on the loading dock level. The evacuation alarm continues to sound, but this area is largely deserted, delivery personnel having joined the building evacuation. Jenkins directs them to a nondescript van parked in a loading bay. This vehicle has modifications: reinforced chassis, bulletproof glass, secure communications. Frank had it maintained for emergencies. As they approach the van, a service door bursts open. 2 men in tactical gear rush through, weapons drawn. Federal marshals, freeze! Ray pushes Sarah and Alex behind a concrete pillar, shielding them with his body. Jenkins drops to one knee, placing the evidence cases carefully aside. Check their credentials, Ray calls out. Real federal marshals announce themselves properly and present identification. The lead man hesitates, hand moving toward an inside pocket, but instead of a badge, he draws a suppressed pistol. Not marshals, Jenkins confirms, his own hand moving with surprising speed for his age. What happens next unfolds with military precision. Jenkins throws a small device that erupts in a blinding flash. Ray lunges forward, years of Marine combat training taking over. A quick strike to the lead man's wrist disarms him. A follow-up to the solar plexus doubles him over. The second man recovers faster, bringing his weapon to bear. But before he can fire, a shot rings out from behind Ray. The man drops, clutching his shoulder. Margaret stands in the doorway they just exited, pistol still raised. We need to move. More coming down the main stairwell. They pile into the van, Jenkins taking the wheel. The engine roars to life as the vehicle accelerates up the ramp and out onto the street, merging smoothly with midday Philadelphia traffic. Are those men? Sarah begins, holding Alex close. Wounded, not killed, Margaret assures her, securing her weapon. Blackwell contractors, not actual law enforcement. The real federal marshals are likely still being processed through building security upstairs. Jenkins navigates expertly through the city streets, taking a circuitous route to avoid potential pursuit. We need to reach the secondary safe house. Frank maintained multiple fallback positions. Ray checks his phone. A message from Diana. Solomon arrested. Blackwell's claiming evidence tampering. Federal warrants issued for all Frank Wilson associates. They're escalating, Ray says grimly, moving faster than we anticipated. Because they're afraid, Jenkins responds. What we found today, the Nelson tape especially, is exactly what they've been trying to bury for 60 years. The secondary safe house is located in an industrial district on the city's outskirts, an unassuming warehouse converted into a livable space. Jenkins guides the van into a loading bay that closes automatically behind them. Inside, the warehouse contains a modest living area, communications equipment, and supplies for an extended stay. The space is utilitarian but secure, reinforced walls, surveillance systems, multiple escape routes. Frank acquired this property in the 1970s under a shell company, Jenkins explains. It doesn't connect to him or the Wilson name in any searchable database. While Sarah gets Alex settled, Ray, Jenkins, and Margaret assess their situation. The evidence cases are opened on a central table, their contents organized methodically. We need to contact Diana, Ray decides. Find out exactly what's happening with Solomon and these federal warrants. Jenkins activates a secure communication system. This routes through multiple proxies. Even if they trace the signal, it will lead them across 3 continents before hitting a dead end. Diana answers immediately, her voice tense. Are you secure? Secondary location, Jenkins confirms. All priority materials recovered. What's our situation? The Blackwells have pulled out on all stops. They're claiming Frank stole confidential Blackwell family business records when he acquired the buildings. They've obtained federal warrants based on corporate espionage charges. That's their cover story, Margaret observes, to justify seizing the buildings and everything in them. Exactly. Solomon was arrested attempting to file emergency motions to block their access. They were holding him on obstruction charges. We need to get him out, Ray insists. I'm working on it, Diana assures him. I still have contacts in the Bureau who owe me favors. But the bigger problem is James Blackwell. He's taken personal charge of this operation. Why would the son be so invested, Ray wonders. These events happened before he was born. Because James Blackwell is carrying on the family tradition, Diana explains. He's not just protecting old secrets. He's protecting current operations. Jenkins brings up files on a computer terminal. James Blackwell, born 1980, West Point graduate, served in Army intelligence, rose to lieutenant colonel before retiring in 2010 under unusual circumstances. Now runs Blackwell Enterprises Defense and Technology divisions. What unusual circumstances, Ray asks. Officially, a medical discharge. Unofficially, he was pushed out after questions arose about operational decisions in Afghanistan, civilian casualties that were covered up, surveillance operations against American contractors that exceeded his authority. He brought Eagle Division tactics to modern warfare, Margaret concludes, and he's continued those operations in the private sector. Diana adds over the comm system. Frank's most recent intelligence suggested James has developed a privatized version of Eagle Division, using Blackwell defense contracts as cover for domestic surveillance and targeted operations. Ray studies James Blackwell's photograph on the screen. A man in his mid-40s with cold eyes and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. So we're not just dealing with historical evidence about Kennedy's assassination. We're confronting an active operation with modern capabilities. Precisely why Frank created such elaborate security measures, Jenkins confirms. He knew the threat wasn't just about exposing past crimes, it was about stopping current ones. A silence falls over the group as the full implications sink in. They're not just historical investigators. They've become active participants in a conflict that spans generations. The moment is interrupted by Alex's voice from the living area. Dad, the TV is showing your picture. They rush to the television where a news broadcast displays Ray's driver's license photo alongside an alert. Philadelphia police seek this man for questioning related to a shooting incident at the Lexington building downtown. The reporter continues, Authorities say Raymond Wilson, a building maintenance worker, is wanted for questioning after an altercation that left two security contractors wounded. Wilson is believed to be traveling with his wife, Sarah, their son, and two accomplices identified as former federal employees, Margaret Brennan and Howard Jenkins. They're painting us as the criminals, Sarah says incredulously. Standard counterintelligence tactic, Margaret explains. Discredit the opposition, control the narrative. Ray turns to Jenkins. How secure is this location? Very, but we should proceed as if it's compromised. The Blackwells have resources we can't anticipate. We need leverage, Ray decides. Something that forces them to back off at least long enough for us to consolidate what we have and clear our names. Jenkins considers this. The Nelson tape is significant, but it's 60 years old, deniable. We need contemporary evidence, something that exposes James Blackwell's current operations. Frank's journal mentioned a second building, the Carrington Tower. He indicated it contains surveillance on recent Blackwell activities. Diana's voice comes through the comm system. The Carrington would be harder to access now. The Blackwells will have all three buildings under heavy security. Not necessarily, Ray counters, studying the building schematics Jenkins has brought up on a tablet. Frank built connecting infrastructure between the buildings, maintenance tunnels, utility conduits, that don't appear on official plans. I saw them in the blueprints at the command center. Jenkins nods slowly. Frank created a network beneath the financial district, repurposed old steam tunnels, obsolete subway maintenance shafts. He could move between the buildings unseen. Can we access this network from outside the buildings? Ray asks. There's an entry point through the old city water system, Jenkins confirms, bringing up more detailed schematics. It would require navigating some tight spaces, but it provides access to all three buildings without going through standard entry points. Ray studies the plans, his building systems expertise, and allowing him to understand the complex infrastructure Frank had modified over decades. I can navigate this, but I'll need help. I'm going with you, Margaret states firmly. Ray turns to Sarah, who has been listening with growing concern. I need you and Alex to stay here with Jenkins. You'll be safer. Sarah takes his hand. Be careful. This isn't what you trained for. Actually, Ray says, glancing at his Marine Corps tattoo, in some ways it is. The preparation is methodical. Jenkins provides them with essential equipment, communications devices, specialized tools for accessing the tunnel network, defensive measures in case of confrontation. Margaret changes into practical clothing suitable for the tight confines they'll be navigating. The Nelson tape and the most critical evidence will remain here, Jenkins decides. If something happens to you, Diana has protocols for retrieving them. Ray kneels beside Alex, who watches the preparations with wide eyes. I need you to be brave, buddy. Stay with Jenkins. Do exactly what he says. Are you going to catch the bad guys, Dad? Ray considers how to answer, then opts for honesty. I'm going to find evidence that will help us prove who the bad guys really are. As dusk falls over Philadelphia, Ray and Margaret depart in an unmarked service van Jenkins provides. They drive to the old city district, where the entrance to the tunnel network lies disguised as an abandoned maintenance access point for the city's Victorian-era water system. The access point is concealed in an alley behind buildings dating to the early 1900s. A rusted grate that appears permanently sealed actually opens with the application of a specific sequence of pressure points, another of Frank's security measures. Frank discovered this network in the 1970s, Margaret explains as they descend a narrow ladder into darkness. The city had forgotten about half these tunnels. He gradually modified them, created connections to the basements of buildings he acquired. Their flashlights reveal brick-lined tunnels dating back more than a century, now retrofitted with modern supports and subtle navigation markers, visible only if you know what to look for. Frank marked the routes with modified utility symbols, Margaret points out. Follow the ones with a small eagle etched beside them, his private joke. They navigate the labyrinth beneath Philadelphia's financial district, moving through spaces that range from cavernous former subway construction shafts to crawl spaces barely wide enough for a person. The air is cool and damp, carrying the mustiness of decades. After nearly an hour, they reach a vertical shaft with modern steel rungs embedded in the concrete. This leads up to the Carrington Tower basement, Margaret whispers. From there, we access the mechanical core to reach Frank's hidden compartments. They ascend carefully, emerging into a dimly lit basement storage area. The Carrington Tower, built in the 1950s, houses primarily financial services firms. At this hour, the building is largely empty, except for security and cleaning staff. Ray leads them to a mechanical room housing the building's HVAC systems. Using his maintenance expertise, he identifies an access panel that doesn't quite match the others, slightly newer, with fasteners of a different type. "This is it," he murmurs, working quickly to remove the panel. Behind it lies not building infrastructure but a small chamber containing file cabinets and electronic equipment. "Frank's listening post," Margaret explains. "He installed surveillance devices throughout the building when he acquired it, focusing on the offices leased by Blackwell subsidiaries. The file cabinets contain organized surveillance records dating from the 1990s to just months before Frank's death. The electronic equipment includes recording devices still actively monitoring certain areas of the building. These are still operational," Ray notes with surprise. "Frank automated the systems," Margaret confirms. "They activate when specific keywords are spoken in the monitored offices or when certain individuals are identified by voice recognition." They begin examining the most recent files, looking for anything connecting James Blackwell to current illegal operations. The task is daunting, decades of surveillance, producing thousands of hours of recordings and corresponding transcripts. "We need to narrow this down," Ray says. "What was Frank most interested in during his final months?" Margaret checks a logbook kept in meticulous chronological order. His last entries focus on something called Operation Sentinel. Multiple references in the spring of this year, primarily from meetings in the Blackwell Technologies offices on the 32nd floor. They locate the corresponding recordings and transcripts. The material reveals James Blackwell discussing a sophisticated surveillance system being implemented under the guise of a government security contract. "Sentinel gives us access to every major communications hub in 12 metropolitan areas," James is heard saying in one recording. "NSA specifications, but with our proprietary backdoors. They monitor the population, we monitor the monitors." Another recording from May. "The Eagle protocol remains intact. Identification of targets still requires board approval, but implementation is now fully automated. No human assets at risk of exposure." "He's describing an assassination program," Margaret says quietly. "One that uses technology rather than human operatives." The most recent recording from just weeks before Frank's death is the most damning. James Blackwell meeting with a senior Justice Department official discussing specific interventions against individuals investigating corporate corruption cases. "Two journalists, a federal prosecutor, and a whistleblower inside Treasury," James lists calmly, "all pursuing matters that could complicate our defense contracts, all experiencing unfortunate accidents or health crises in the past month." "And nothing traceable?" the justice official asks. "The Eagle flies invisible now," James responds. "Technology has its advantages over human assets. No conscience, no hesitation, no evidence." Ray and Margaret exchange glances, the implications clear. James Blackwell has modernized his grandfather's operation, using technology to eliminate threats just as effectively as the original Eagle division used human operatives. "This is it," Ray says. "Current evidence of active operations. This isn't just historical conspiracy, it's ongoing criminal activity at the highest levels." As they gather the most crucial recordings, a sound from outside the hidden chamber freezes them in place. Voices in the mechanical room. "Security sweep, East Quadrant clear." A professional voice, military cadence, proceeding to HVAC control room. A second voice, closer. Margaret silently hands Ray the storage drive containing the copied files. She draws her weapon, positioning herself near the hidden entrance. The flashlight beams sweep the mechanical room outside their hiding place. Ray holds his breath, painfully aware that the access panel they removed is now visible evidence of their presence. "Hold up," the first voice says. "That panel's been tampered with." "Call it in," the second voice responds. "Possible intrusion in progress." Margaret makes a quick series of hand signals to Ray. Military shorthand indicating they need to move immediately. She points to a second access point at the back of the hidden chamber, barely visible behind a filing cabinet. Ray understands. Another of Frank's escape routes. They slide the cabinet aside silently, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper into the building's infrastructure. Just as they slip through, the access panel to the mechanical room is pulled completely open. Flashlight beams cut through the space they occupied seconds before. "Clear the room! Find them!" Ray and Margaret navigate the tight passage, moving as quickly as possible while maintaining silence. The passage descends sharply, eventually connecting to the tunnel network they used to enter. "They'll lock down the building," Margaret whispers. Standard procedure would include checking all mechanical spaces and access points. "So we don't go out the way we came in," Ray responds, studying the mental map he's formed of the tunnel network. "There's another exit point near the river, if I read the schematics correctly." They change direction, heading east through the labyrinthine passages. Behind them, faint sounds of pursuit echo. Radio communications, footsteps, the methodical progression of a professional search team. The tunnel network becomes older as they move eastward, the construction dating back to the 19th century. The brick-lined passages are narrower, the air heavier with moisture from the nearby Delaware River. They emerge eventually through a maintenance door disguised as part of an old warehouse foundation near Penn's Landing. The night air feels shockingly fresh after the stale confines of the tunnels. "We need transportation," Margaret says, scanning the waterfront area. The industrial district is largely deserted at this hour. Ray spots a maintenance worker climbing into a city utilities truck. "Wait here." He approaches the worker, fabricating a convincing story about a water main emergency several blocks away. His knowledge of municipal systems makes the deception credible. The worker makes a call to verify, but Ray provides enough technical details to overcome suspicion. Minutes later, they're driving away in the borrowed utilities truck, the worker waiting for a supervisor who won't arrive. "Quick thinking," Margaret acknowledges as they navigate back toward the safe house. "Frank was right about your adaptability." Is that what he called it? I'd call it years of talking my way into buildings for maintenance jobs I wasn't officially assigned to. They drive a circuitous route, ensuring they're not followed, before approaching the warehouse safe house. Jenkins has established a recognition protocol, a specific sequence of headlight flashes that identifies them before they reach the perimeter. Inside, they find Jenkins monitoring communications channels, with Sarah and Alex resting in the makeshift living quarters. "You made the news again," Jenkins informs them grimly. Building security reported an intrusion at the Carrington Tower. The Blackwells are claiming corporate espionage and Homeland Security violations. "Homeland Security?" Ray questions. "They're alleging their government defense contracts were targeted by foreign agents. It's a cover story to justify the massive security response." Ray places the storage drive on the central table. "We found something worth their concern. Evidence of active operations, assassinations disguised as accidents, surveillance of federal agencies, corruption inside the Justice Department." Jenkins connects the drive to a secure terminal, and they review the recordings together. His expression grows increasingly grave. Frank suspected James had modernized the operation, but this exceeds even his concerns. This isn't just maintaining old secrets. It's an expanded program with contemporary targets. "Can we use this as leverage?" Ray asks. "Force them to back off?" "It's more complicated than that," Jenkins responds. "These recordings implicate officials at the highest levels of government. Release this without proper protection, and we'd be signing our own death warrants." "So what's our play?" Jenkins considers the question carefully. "We need to secure ourselves legally before exposing this material. That means getting Solomon Pierce released and establishing a proper chain of evidence that will stand up in court." "The Blackwells control too many judges," Margaret objects. "Legal channels are compromised." "Not all of them," Jenkins counters. "Frank identified reliable federal judges in multiple jurisdictions. Solomon knows which ones to approach." The secure communication system activates, Diana Harper's voice coming through with unusual urgency. "We have a serious problem. The Blackwells have located your position." Ray stiffens. "How? This location isn't connected to Frank in any traceable way." "They're not tracking Frank. They're tracking you, Ray, your phone, your truck, your financial transactions. They've deployed their full surveillance capabilities." "But I left my phone at the apartment," Ray objects. and the truck is still at the farmhouse. A cold realization dawns on him. He turns to Alex, who sits playing a handheld game console nearby. Alex, where did you get that game system? The boy looks up. It was here when we arrived. Mr. Jenkins said it was left for me. Jenkins pales. I didn't provide any game system. Ray takes the device from Alex, examining it closely. The design appears normal, but when he turns it over, he notices a subtle modification to the battery compartment. It's a tracker, and probably a listening device. Margaret's expression hardens. The Blackwells know you have a son with medical issues. They planted this knowing he'd be the one to use it. Using a child, Sarah's voice shakes with anger. How much time do we have? Ray asked Diana over the comm system. Minutes, not hours. Satellite imagery shows vehicles converging on your location from multiple directions. Jenkins moves with sudden efficiency, activating emergency protocols on the main computer system. Evacuation Plan Alpha, we need to split up. Standard counter-surveillance procedure. No, Ray objects firmly. I'm not separating from my family. They're not after your family, Ray. They're after the evidence and anyone who's seen it. Sarah and Alex are leverage, not targets. The implications sink in. So we split up not to evade them, but to protect my family by keeping them away from the evidence. Exactly. Diana has arranged a safe location for Sarah and Alex. Margaret will accompany them. You and I will take the evidence through a different route. The plan forms quickly. Margaret, Sarah, and Alex will depart in the van, heading to a location only Diana knows. Ray and Jenkins will take the most critical evidence, including the Nelson tape and the new Sentinel recordings, and proceed to a fallback position where they can connect with Diana's bureau contacts. As they prepare to move, Sarah embraces Ray fiercely. This isn't what I signed up for when I married a building maintenance worker. It's not what I signed up for either, Ray admits, but it's what Frank left me, a chance to expose something that's poisoned our country for generations. Just come back to us, Sarah whispers. That's all that matters. Alex hugs his father tightly. Are you going to be okay, Dad? Ray kneels to his son's level. I'm going to be fine, and so are you. Mom and Margaret will keep you safe until I can join you. As the two groups prepare to separate, distant headlights appear on the access road leading to the warehouse. Jenkins checks the security monitors. Multiple vehicles, professional formation. We're out of time. Margaret leads Sarah and Alex to the van, taking a reinforced case containing copies of the most critical evidence as insurance. They'll exit through a secondary loading bay on the warehouse's north side. Ray and Jenkins gather the primary evidence, the original recordings, the Nelson tape, Frank's most damning documentation. They prepare to exit through a concealed access point that connects to another section of the tunnel network. Stay on the secure channel, Jenkins instructs Margaret. Check in using the coded sequences only. The warehouse's exterior lights suddenly illuminate as powerful searchlights sweep the perimeter. A voice on a loudspeaker breaks the night silence. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The building is surrounded. All occupants must exit with hands visible. Jenkins checks the security monitors again, his expression shifting from concern to confusion. Those are actual Bureau tactical teams, not Blackwell contractors. Could Diana have called in Bureau support? Ray asks. Not without consulting us first. This isn't right. The loudspeaker activates again. Raymond Wilson, this is Special Agent in Charge Thomas Calloway, FBI. We're not here for you. We're here for the evidence you've recovered concerning James Blackwell and Operation Sentinel. Ray and Jenkins exchange confused glances. The FBI shouldn't know about Operation Sentinel. They just discovered it themselves hours ago. This is a trap, Jenkins decides. The Blackwells have compromised Bureau personnel. They're using official channels to flush us out. But before they can implement their escape plan, the secure communication system activates. Diana's voice comes through, but accompanied by another, male, authoritative. Ray, this is Diana. Agent Calloway is legitimate. He's part of an internal Bureau investigation into Blackwell influence within federal agencies. I've been working with his team for months. This wasn't in Frank's files, Jenkins objects. Diana, verify your identity. Protocol 7. October rainfall brings May clarity, Diana responds, a verification phrase established years earlier. The male voice, presumably Calloway, adds, Mr. Wilson, we've been monitoring James Blackwell for 18 months as part of an internal corruption investigation. Your father's evidence could be the missing piece we need to move against him legally. Ray hesitates, caught between conflicting imperatives. Trust these FBI agents who appeared without warning, or maintain Frank's decades of caution and escape with the evidence. Jenkins mutes the communication system temporarily. This could be legitimate, but it could also be the most sophisticated trap the Blackwells have laid yet. What would Frank do? Ray asks. Jenkins considers the question. Frank would verify independently. He'd never surrender the evidence without absolute certainty. Ray unmutes the system. Agent Calloway, we need verification beyond Diana's word. Prove you're not working for the Blackwells. Fair enough, Calloway responds. Diana has informed me that you recovered an audio recording from 1965, James Nelson's final interview before his death. Nelson mentioned a meeting between Victor Blackwell Sr. and Department of Defense official George Reynolds on November 24, 1963. Ray tenses. This is indeed what the tape contained. Calloway continues. What you don't know is that George Reynolds was my grandfather. He was coerced into the Eagle Division program through blackmail. For his death in 1998, he provided sworn testimony about Blackwell involvement in Kennedy's assassination, testimony that was buried by compromised Justice Department officials. I'm pursuing a family legacy too, Mr. Wilson. My grandfather tried to expose the truth and failed. I've spent my career working to finish what he started. The revelation lands like a thunderbolt. Ray looks to Jenkins, whose expression has shifted from suspicion to cautious hope. This could be the ally Frank always hoped for, Jenkins says quietly. Someone inside the system with both the authority and the motivation to act on his evidence. Still, caution prevails. If you're legitimate, Ray calls out over the communication system, then you'll agree to our terms. We don't surrender the original evidence. We provide copies, with the original secured as insurance. Agreed, Calloway responds without hesitation. My team will establish a security perimeter. You can verify our identities before any evidence changes hands. The warehouse's main door opens. Margaret returns from seeing Sarah and Alex safely to the van. They've held position upon hearing the FBI announcement. What's happening, she asks. Potentially what Frank spent his life waiting for, Jenkins responds, someone in power willing to act on his evidence. As Ray moves toward the door, prepared to meet these potential allies, his mind races with questions. Is this truly the breakthrough Frank had worked toward for decades? Or an elaborate deception by the Blackwells? The moment of truth has arrived, a culmination of Frank Wilson's life's work in the legacy he passed to the son he protected from a distance. Whatever comes next will determine whether 60 years of secrets finally see the light of day, or whether the shadows will continue to obscure one of American history's darkest chapters. The secondary safe house stands silent in the industrial district, its weathered exterior concealing reinforced walls and state-of-the-art security systems. Inside, Ray Wilson studies the evidence spread across a metal table, microfiche records, audio tapes, and the encrypted drives containing decades of Frank's meticulous work. Outside, Philadelphia's skyline glimmers in the distance, the three buildings Ray now owns forming a triangle among the towers, monuments to Frank Wilson's obsession and legacy. Jenkins works at a computer terminal, verifying Diana's information about Solomon Pierce's arrest. They're holding him at the federal building downtown. Official charge is obstruction of justice, but it's a holding tactic. They want to pressure him to reveal our location. Margaret enters from the security monitoring station, her expression grim. Perimeter sensors are active. We have a secure radius of 300 yards. No signs of surveillance yet, but we need to assume the Blackwells are searching methodically. Sarah sits with Alex in the makeshift living area, the boy's medical equipment arranged nearby. Despite the tension, the medication has stabilized his breathing. Ray approaches his family, the weight of the situation evident in every line of his face. We can't stay here long. The Blackwells will have pulled city records, property tax files. They'll be checking every building with any connection to Frank or his known associates. Sarah meets his gaze steadily. What's our next move? We need to verify whether this FBI agent, Calloway, is legitimate. If his operation against the Blackwells is real, he could be the ally Frank spent decades looking for. Jenkins joins them. his voice low. Diana is checking Calloway's credentials through back channels. Until we're certain, we maintain protocol. Trust no one. Verify everything. The secure communication system activates, Diana's voice coming through with cautious optimism. Initial verification looks promising. Thomas Calloway heads the Bureau's Internal Oversight Division. His career path shows no connections to Blackwell Enterprises or subsidiaries. His grandfather was indeed George Reynolds, Department of Defense, mentioned in Nelson's recording. That could be public knowledge, Margaret counters, or planted background to establish credibility. True, Diana acknowledges, but I've also confirmed he's been running a classified investigation into Justice Department corruption for 18 months. It's compartmentalized. Less than a dozen people know about it. Ray considers this information. We need direct verification, something the Blackwells couldn't fake. Jenkins nods in agreement. Frank established protocols for exactly this scenario. A verification meeting, neutral location, multiple security layers, no evidence present. The plan forms quickly. Diana will arrange a meeting with Calloway at a public location, the Franklin Institute, a science museum in central Philadelphia. Jenkins will establish counter-surveillance measures. Ray will meet Calloway personally while Margaret remains with Sarah and Alex at the safe house. As preparations continue, Ray examines the Nelson tape again, listening through headphones to catch details they might have missed. The recording captures not just information, but emotion. Nelson's growing fear, Frank's determination. These weren't just investigators. They were men who recognized they were challenging forces that wouldn't hesitate to eliminate them. Frank's whole life was defined by this investigation. Ray muses aloud. He sacrificed everything, even his role as my father, to pursue this. Jenkins pauses in his preparations. Frank believed the Blackwells represented something fundamentally corrupt in American power structures. Not just criminals, but symptoms of a deeper institutional sickness. Exposing them became more than an investigation. It was a moral imperative. But at what cost, Ray asks, thinking of the lifetime he spent without knowing his real father. Jenkins has no answer for this. The personal price of Frank's crusade hangs unresolved between them. Hours later, Ray stands in the Egyptian exhibition hall of the Franklin Institute, surrounded by ancient artifacts and tourists. The museum provides the perfect meeting environment, public enough for safety, busy enough for anonymity, with multiple exits and sight lines. Diana arrives first, positioning herself near a display of hieroglyphics with clear views of all entrances. Ray maintains distance, browsing exhibits while monitoring reflections in glass cases. A man enters the hall, mid-50s, lean, with the unmistakable bearing of career bureau. He wears no visible sidearm, but moves with the awareness of someone accustomed to carrying one. He examines a sarcophagus display, apparently casual but positioning himself optimally for conversation while maintaining awareness of surroundings. Diana makes the approach, exchanging brief words before nodding toward Ray. The signal given, Ray moves toward them, marine instincts cataloging every detail of the man who could be either salvation or threat. Ray Wilson, Thomas Calloway, FBI. The handshake is firm, the eye contact direct and unwavering. No badge is displayed. This isn't an official encounter. Let's walk. They move through the museum, maintaining conversation amid the background noise of school groups and families. Your father and my grandfather were on opposite sides of a line, Mr. Wilson. Reynolds participated in Eagle Division operations under duress, blackmailed through threats to his family. But he kept records, just as your father did. And these records surfaced when? After his death in 1997, he left them to me in a similar manner to how Frank left his evidence to you, a legacy of guilt and responsibility. Ray studies Calloway's face for deception. Why haven't you moved against the Blackwells before now? If you've had evidence for decades, incomplete evidence, suspicions but no smoking gun. Reynolds knew about Eagle Division operations but couldn't prove Blackwell direction. Frank's evidence, particularly the Nelson tape, provides the connection we've lacked. They pause before a pendulum exhibit, watching the metal weight swing in its hypnotic arc. Why should I trust you? Calloway considers this question carefully. You shouldn't, not completely. Trust the evidence instead. The Nelson tape mentions a hunting lodge in Maryland where Victor Blackwell Sr. received payment from Reynolds after Kennedy's assassination. That lodge still exists, now a private retreat for Blackwell Enterprises executives. James Blackwell maintains an office there with a very specific security feature, a painting of his grandfather that conceals a wall safe. Inside that safe is Reynolds' half of the evidence, documentation of every Eagle Division operation from 1961 to 1973, including the Kennedy assassination. How do you know what's in the safe? Because Reynolds told me before he died, and because I've spent the last 5 years working my way close enough to the Blackwells to confirm it exists, without being able to access it legally. Diana, who has been monitoring nearby, joins them briefly. Calloway's story checks out. Reynolds' connection to Eagle Division is documented in declassified files I accessed this morning. The dates and operations align with Frank's intelligence. Ray makes his decision. What exactly are you proposing? A joint operation. My bureau team provides the legal framework and official authority. Your father's evidence combined with Reynolds' documentation creates an airtight case against both the historical crimes and James Blackwell's current operations. And my family's safety? Witness protection can be arranged immediately, but the most effective protection is exposure. Once the evidence is public, eliminating your family serves no purpose for the Blackwells. Ray considers the proposal, weighing risks against the opportunity to finally complete Frank's mission. I need to consult with the others. Back at the safe house, Ray briefs the team on Calloway's proposal. Opinions divide predictably. Jenkins counseling continued caution. Margaret seeing the practical necessity of bureau resources. Sarah concerned primarily with Alex's safety. If we do this, Ray says finally, we maintain control of the original evidence. Copies only until we're certain. Jenkins nods in agreement. And we need insurance? A contingency plan if Calloway isn't what he appears to be. The hunting lodge, Margaret suggests. If Reynolds' documentation really exists there, it corroborates Calloway's story and provides leverage against the Blackwells independent of bureau involvement. You're suggesting we break into a Blackwell property? Sarah asks incredulously. Not break in, Ray clarifies, military assessment already forming. Reconnaissance only. Verify the lodge exists as Calloway described it. If his intelligence is accurate about that, it supports his credibility about everything else. The plan develops with precision. Ray and Margaret will conduct surveillance of the Maryland hunting lodge, while Jenkins coordinates with Diana and Calloway for the handover of evidence copies. Sarah and Alex will remain at the safe house with additional security protocols activated. The drive to Maryland takes 2 hours. Ray and Margaret traveling in an unmarked vehicle provided from Frank's resources. The rural landscape grows increasingly isolated as they approach the Blackwell property. 500 acres of forested land surrounding a lodge built in the 1920s. They establish observation from a wooded ridge overlooking the main buildings. High-powered optics reveal a level of security inappropriate for a simple corporate retreat. Motion sensors, surveillance cameras disguised as landscape lighting, guards with military bearing conducting regular perimeter checks. Protecting more than just executive privacy, Margaret observes. That's a security detail for something valuable. Through their surveillance, they observe James Blackwell himself arrive via helicopter, distinguished even at a distance by his commanding presence and the deference shown by staff. He enters the main lodge, remaining inside as evening approaches. We've confirmed the location, Ray says, but not what's inside. Without accessing the building itself, we can't verify Calloway's claim about the safe. The risk is too high for direct infiltration, Margaret assesses. These men are professionals, likely former military. Even with your Marine training, the odds are prohibitive. Ray studies the property layout, noting the service road, staff movements, and security patrol patterns. We don't need to get inside. We just need to confirm enough details to establish whether Calloway's intelligence is accurate. They withdraw before darkness falls, returning to Philadelphia with their observations. At the safe house, Jenkins has news of his own. Calloway's bureau credentials check out completely. Diana accessed his personnel file through her remaining contacts. His history matches what he told you, including the family connection to George Reynolds. Ray reviews all available information, weighing options with the methodical thoroughness of his military training. We proceed with the evidence handover, but maintain contingencies. Jenkins, prepare copies of everything except the Nelson tape. We hold that back as insurance. The evidence transfer is arranged for the following morning. Neutral territory at Valley Forge National Park, with Calloway and a minimal bureau team. Ray insists that Sarah and Alex remain at the safe house with Jenkins, despite Sarah's protests. I should be with you for this, she argues. We face this together. Alex needs one of us with him, Ray counters, and if something goes wrong, you'll need to implement the emergency protocols Jenkins established. The unspoken reality hangs between them. If the Blackwells have compromised Calloway, if this is a trap, then one of them needs to remain free to protect their son. Dawn breaks over Valley Forge, the historic revolutionary battlefield now serving as the stage for a more modern confrontation with power. Ray and Margaret arrive first, conducting counter-surveillance sweeps of the meeting area, an isolated section of park with clear sight lines and multiple exit routes. Calloway arrives with 2 agents, both maintaining professional distance while securing the perimeter. The exchange proceeds with careful protocol, evidence copies provided, chain of custody documented, verification of contents confirmed. This is even more comprehensive than we anticipated, Calloway acknowledges, reviewing the financial records that trace Blackwell money through 6 decades of influence operations. Combined with Reynolds' documentation, it creates an unbreakable chain of evidence. When do you move against James Blackwell? We're preparing warrants now. With this evidence, we can access his corporate records, banking information, and communications. The operation will be synchronized across multiple jurisdictions to prevent evidence destruction. And Solomon Pierce? The charges against him are being dropped as we speak. My team is extracting him from federal custody now. The exchange complete, Ray and Margaret prepare to depart, but as they turn to leave, Calloway delivers a final piece of information. There's something else you should know about Frank Wilson, something not in any of his files. Ray pauses, sensing the weight of Calloway's words. Frank approached my grandfather in 1978, 15 years after Kennedy's assassination. He had gathered enough evidence by then to expose Reynolds' involvement in Eagle Division. But instead of arresting him, Frank offered him a choice: turn informant against the Blackwells or face prosecution. Reynolds chose to help Frank. Together they spent the next 2 decades documenting Eagle Division operations from both sides. Frank from the outside, Reynolds from within. Why are you telling me this now? Because you need to understand the full measure of your father's character. He could have arrested Reynolds, claimed a career-making case. Instead, he recognized a man who had been coerced into terrible acts and offered him redemption through action. Ray absorbs this information, seeing yet another dimension of the father he never knew. My grandfather told me that working with Frank Wilson saved his soul, that documenting the truth was the only atonement possible for his part in Eagle Division operations. This revelation accompanies Ray back to the safe house, adding complexity to his understanding of Frank's life's work. Not just investigation and evidence, but redemption and justice shaped by moral nuance. At the safe house, Ray finds Jenkins in the communications center, monitoring bureau channels with growing concern. Something's wrong. The warrants Calloway mentioned, they're not appearing in the federal system. No judge has signed anything related to Blackwell or Eagle Division. Ray checks his phone, no updates from Calloway since the morning exchange. Could they be using a specialized classified channel? Possible, but unlikely for this type of operation. Standard procedure would still require judicial record, even if sealed. Margaret joins them, her expression grave. Diana's gone silent too. No communication for the past 3 hours. A knot forms in Ray's stomach, the familiar sensation from combat operations when intelligence suddenly hurls. We need to consider that Calloway might be compromised, or that his operation has been shut down from above. Sarah enters, having put Alex down for a nap. What does that mean for us? It means we can't rely on bureau protection or legal channels. We need to accelerate our contingency plans. The secure communication system suddenly activates, Solomon Pierce's voice coming through with urgent clarity. Ray, are you receiving? This channel should be secure. Solomon, where are you? A safe location. Listen carefully. Calloway's operation has been suspended by direct order from the Attorney General's office. Official reason: pending review of investigative procedures. Unofficial reason. Someone very high up doesn't want the Blackwell evidence made public. Is Calloway compromised? Not willingly. He's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His team has been reassigned. Classic containment protocol. Ray exchanges glances with the others. The implications clear. So we're on our own again. Not entirely. Calloway managed to secure copies of the evidence you provided. He's established a dead man's switch. If anything happens to him, the evidence goes to multiple media outlets and congressional oversight committees. But that doesn't protect us in the immediate term. No, the Blackwells will be aware the evidence has been copied. They'll accelerate efforts to contain everyone involved with Frank's investigation. As if confirming Solomon's warning, perimeter alarms activate throughout the safe house. Jenkins checks the security monitors, his expression hardening. Multiple vehicles approaching from the access road. Professional formation, tactical team deployment. Ray moves with decisive calm, military training taking over. Evacuation Protocol Alpha, we have less than 10 minutes. The team mobilizes with practiced efficiency, essential evidence secured in specialized containers, communications equipment wiped, escape routes confirmed. Sarah gathers Alex, who remains drowsy from his medication. They found us too quickly, Margaret notes, checking her weapon. Someone has information they shouldn't have. Worry about that later, Ray responds. For now, focus on extraction. The safe house's primary defense isn't resistance, but evasion. A tunnel system beneath the warehouse floor, connecting to the city's storm drainage network. Jenkins activates the security countermeasures. Automated systems designed to delay pursuit without causing casualties. As they prepare to enter the tunnel, a priority alert sounds from the communication system. Diana's voice comes through, tense but controlled. Blackwell forces have mobilized across the city. They're not just coming for you. They're targeting everyone connected to Frank's investigation. This isn't containment anymore. It's elimination. What changed? Why now? James Blackwell accessed the evidence copies Calloway secured. He knows exactly what you have, including the Nelson tape. Operation Sentinel is being shut down, digital footprints erased. They're cutting losses and eliminating witnesses. The implications land with crushing weight. This isn't just about historical evidence anymore. It's about stopping an active cover-up of contemporary crimes. Where are you, Diana? Compromised location. I'm mobile, avoiding pursuit. Listen carefully. There's one play left. The hunting lodge in Maryland. Reynolds' documentation is still there, in the safe behind the painting, just as Calloway said. We've confirmed the lodge exists, but infiltration would be suicide with their security. Not now. James Blackwell has pulled his security detail from the lodge to support the Philadelphia operation. The property is minimally staffed, skeleton crew only. It's the one location he thinks is secure enough to leave unprotected. Ray processes this information with tactical precision. So while they're hunting us here, you have a narrow window to access the lodge and secure Reynolds' documentation. Combined with what you already have, it would be enough to force exposure even without Bureau support. The decision forms with clarity born of necessity. Jenkins, take Sarah and Alex through the tunnel system to the secondary extraction point. Margaret and I will proceed to the Maryland location. Sarah grips Ray's arm. We stay together. That's what we agreed. This is the best protection for Alex. Split their forces, create multiple targets, make them divide their resources. The painful logic is irrefutable. Jenkins speaks softly. I'll protect them with my life, Ray. You have my word. The parting is brief. No time for lengthy goodbyes with hostile forces approaching. Ray embraces Sarah and Alex, the latter still not fully understanding the danger, but sensing the gravity in his father's expression. I'll find you at the rendezvous point, though I do know. 24 hours. As Jenkins leads Sarah and Alex into the tunnel system, Ray and Margaret prepare for their counteroffensive. The tactical shift is dramatic but sound. While Blackwell forces converge on Philadelphia locations, they will move against the temporarily vulnerable Maryland Lodge. They depart through a secondary exit as the first security perimeter breaches trigger. Automated systems activate. Non-lethal countermeasures designed to confuse and delay rather than harm. Smoke deployments, false heat signatures, and electronic interference by precious minutes for their escape. The drive to Maryland is conducted with heightened situational awareness, route variations, vehicle exchanges, counter-surveillance techniques. Ray's Marine training and Margaret's decades of operational experience combined to create a formidable evasion capability. They reach the hunting lodge property near midnight, approaching through dense forest rather than access roads. Night vision equipment reveals the reduced security presence Diana had indicated. Minimal patrols, standard automated systems, no tactical team presence. Service entrance on the east side, Margaret indicates, consulting satellite imagery on a secured tablet. Staff quarters adjacent, minimal activity at this hour. They infiltrate with precision that would impress Ray's former Marine commanders, bypassing exterior sensors, exploiting blind spots in the surveillance coverage, accessing the main building through a maintenance entry with security systems Frank had documented years earlier. The interior of the hunting lodge is opulent in a distinctly masculine way. Trophy heads mounted on walls, leather furniture, a stone fireplace large enough to stand in. The rural retreat facade conceals state-of-the-art security and communications technology visible to Ray's trained eye. Second floor, north wing, Margaret whispers, consulting the building schematics. James Blackwell's private office. They navigate the building silently, avoiding the few staff present at this hour. The office is secured with a keypad lock, more sophisticated than typical for a corporate retreat. Biometric backup, Ray notes, examining the door security. But primary entry is key code. Margaret produces a specialized device from her equipment bag. Frank developed this for banking security assessments. It can detect recent keypad heat signatures, narrowing possible combinations. The device works as promised, identifying the most recently pressed digits. With these parameters, the possible combinations reduce from 10,000 to just 24. Systematic testing identifies the correct sequence on the 17th attempt. The office beyond matches Calloway's description perfectly. Wood-paneled walls, antique desk, military memorabilia in glass cases. And prominently displayed behind the desk, a large portrait of Victor Blackwell Sr., the family patriarch. Ray approaches the painting, examining it carefully for security measures. Finding none, he gently swings it forward on concealed hinges, revealing exactly what Calloway described, a wall safe with digital combination lock. Now comes the challenging part, Margaret acknowledges. We don't have the combination. Ray studies the safe thoughtfully. James Blackwell is third-generation military intelligence. He understands digital security, encryption, all the modern protection systems, which means he also understands their vulnerabilities. People who know technology's weaknesses often rely on traditional methods for truly critical security. Ray examines the safe more carefully. This isn't a random digital lock. It's a customized system. Limited attempts before lockdown, no factory reset option. James would use something meaningful but not obvious. He considers what they know about James Blackwell, West Point graduate, former Army intelligence, grandfather's protege. Military men of his generation often use significant dates. His commissioning date at West Point? Margaret consults her tablet. June 14, 2002. Ray enters the digits, 061402. The safe remains locked. His grandfather's birth date? March 7, 1918. The combination 030718 yields nothing. Ray steps back, thinking more deeply about the psychological profile they have assembled. James Blackwell isn't just continuing his grandfather's work. He's honoring a legacy. What would be the most significant date in that legacy? The realization comes with chilling clarity. November 22, 1963. Ray enters 11:20-63. The safe clicks open. Inside lies exactly what Calloway described. A bound leather portfolio containing hundreds of pages of documentation. Operation reports, financial records, communications transcripts, all bearing Department of Defense watermarks and George Reynolds' signature. This is it, Margaret confirms, scanning the contents. Reynolds' complete documentation of Eagle Division operations from 1961 to 1973. Names, dates, targets, authorizations. Ray finds the section specific to Kennedy's assassination, operational planning documents, payment authorizations, and most damning after-action reports confirming successful neutralization of executive branch security threat. As they secure the documentation, Ray discovers something unexpected at the back of the safe, a sealed envelope addressed to the Wilson family. The handwriting isn't Frank's. This is recent, Margaret observes, and that's George Reynolds' handwriting, according to Diana's description. Ray opens the envelope carefully. Inside is a letter dated just 6 months ago, shortly before Reynolds' death. To the Wilson family, it begins. If you are reading this, you've discovered the truth Frank dedicated his life to exposing. What you may not know is why Frank Wilson pursued this case with such singular determination at such personal cost. Ray continues reading, his hands growing increasingly unsteady. In 1972, Frank Wilson came closer to exposing Eagle Division than anyone before or since. He had documentation, witnesses, a case prepared for a grand jury. The Blackwells and their government allies couldn't touch him legally. His evidence was too well protected. So they targeted the one thing Frank couldn't protect completely, his family. Marie Wilson, Frank's wife and Ray's mother, was not killed in a random car accident, as official records indicate. Her vehicle was tampered with by Eagle Division operatives under Victor Blackwell's orders. Frank was given a choice: pursue the case and lose his son as well, or walk away, separate himself from his family, and his son would be allowed to live. He chose his son's life over justice, over his own happiness, over everything. I know this because I was part of the operation. This truth has haunted me for decades. Frank knew I was involved, yet when he approached me years later, he offered redemption rather than vengeance. It is the greatest mercy I have ever known. This documentation is my atonement. Use it to finish what Frank started, not just for justice, but for Marie Wilson, whose murder has gone unpunished for too long. The letter is signed simply, George Reynolds. Ray stares at the pages, emotions warring within him. Grief for the mother he thought died by accident, anger at the deliberate murder concealed for decades, and a profound new understanding of Frank's choices and sacrifices. He didn't abandon us, Ray whispers. He was protecting me the only way he could. Margaret gives him a moment with this revelation before gently reminding him of their situation. We need to move. We have what we came for. They secure the Reynolds documentation, ensuring both physical safety and digital backup via photographs of key pages. As they prepare to exit, Ray makes a decision that diverges from their original plan. We're not running anymore. We're not hiding this evidence or waiting for the right authorities. The Blackwells murdered my mother and forced my father to give up his family. It ends now. What are you suggesting? Maximum exposure, not just to Callaway or the Bureau, but to everyone. Media, Congress, international outlets. So much exposure that no one can bury it again. Their extraction proceeds with the same precision as their entry, careful, methodical, professional. But their destination has changed. Instead of returning to Philadelphia and the uncertainty of who might be compromised, they head to Washington, D.C., where Diana has established connections with journalists who specialize in government accountability. As dawn breaks over the Capitol, Ray Wilson prepares to complete the mission his father began 60 years earlier. Not just exposing historical conspiracy, but revealing an active criminal enterprise with tentacles throughout American power structures. The evidence, Frank's meticulous documentation combined with Reynolds's insider confirmation creates an irrefutable case that no amount of influence can suppress once publicly revealed. In a secure hotel room, Ray makes one final call before the evidence goes public, to the emergency contact number Jenkins established for their rendezvous. Sarah answers, relief evident in her voice. Ray, are you safe? We're secure. We have everything. Reynolds' documentation, confirmation of everything Frank worked for, and something else, the truth about my mother's death. He explains the contents of Reynolds' letter, the revelation of his mother's murder, and Frank's impossible choice. He sacrificed everything to keep me safe. His career, his marriage, his role as a father, all to protect me from the Blackwells. What happens now? Exposure. Diana has arranged meetings with journalists, congressional oversight staff, and international press. By this afternoon, the evidence will be too widely distributed for anyone to contain it. And then we rebuild our lives. The trust Frank established is legitimate. The properties and funds will be released once the Blackwell's legal challenges collapse under criminal indictment. We'll have resources, security. But most importantly, Ray continues, we'll have the truth about Frank, about my mother, about a conspiracy that shaped American history. Frank Wilson spent his life gathering this evidence not just for justice, but for his family, for the truth to finally be known. Hours later, Ray stands before the Lincoln Memorial, the symbolic weight of the location appropriate for what's about to happen. Journalists gather for what they've been told is a major revelation about government corruption. As cameras activate and recorders capture his words, Ray Wilson, building maintenance worker, Marine veteran, son of Frank Wilson, begins the process of exposing a 60-year conspiracy that reaches to the highest levels of American power. My name is Ray Wilson. My father was FBI Special Agent Franklin Wilson. This is his story, and the story of a conspiracy he gave his life to expose. In that moment, Ray fulfills both his father's professional legacy and his personal one, bringing truth to light while honoring the family bonds that even the most powerful forces in America couldn't ultimately destroy. The story that began with a loose floorboard in an abandoned farmhouse concludes on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. A son completing the mission his father began, healing the wounds of the past while securing justice for the future. Frank Wilson's legacy finally is complete. 1 year later, Ray Wilson stands at Arlington National Cemetery, the autumn breeze rustling through the meticulously maintained grounds. Before him, a newly installed headstone bears the name Franklin James Wilson, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation, 1932 to 2023. The FBI Honor Guard has departed. The ceremonial flags have been folded. What remains is a family, Ray, Sarah, and Alex, paying their respects to a man finally recognized for his service. The congressional investigation sparked by Ray's revelations continues its deliberate work. James Blackwell awaits trial, his corporate empire dismantled under RICO statutes. Operation Sentinel's infrastructure has been exposed, its digital tendrils traced through government systems and corporate networks alike. The full truth about Kennedy's assassination remains contested in public discourse, as such momentous events always will be. But the evidence Frank Wilson and George Reynolds compiled has forced a formal reassessment, an acknowledgement that the lone gunman narrative was, at minimum, incomplete. More importantly, the modern incarnation of Eagle Division has been dismantled, its operations subjected to congressional oversight, its methods exposed to public scrutiny. The pendulum of national security and civil liberties swings ever back toward balance, if only for a time. Thomas Callaway approaches, now reinstated as head of the Bureau's expanded Internal Oversight Division. The Attorney General signed off on the final commendation this morning. Your father's full service record is officially restored, with recognition of his counterintelligence work against domestic threats. Ray nods, his expression contemplative. He never sought recognition. Men of his generation rarely did. They understood that service itself was the reward. Sarah adjusts the small arrangement of flowers at the base of the headstone. Alex, now healthier thanks to proper medical care, places a small model airplane beside them, a nod to Frank's hobby that Ray had discovered in the farmhouse attic. The trust fund disbursement is complete, Callaway continues. The 3 buildings have been cleared of all legal challenges. The Frank Wilson Foundation's first grants will be announced next week. Ray had established the foundation with the proceeds from the properties, supporting families of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty, funding transparency in government operations, and providing medical assistance for children with respiratory conditions. Not everything has been resolved, Ray acknowledges. Some of those implicated in the Blackwell networks remain in positions of influence. Some records remain classified. The work continues, Callaway agrees. Systems corrupt slowly and heal even more slowly. But the balance has shifted. Oversight has been strengthened. As they depart the cemetery, Alex runs ahead, his breathing strong and steady in the crisp air. Sarah takes Ray's hand, their shared journey having forged a deeper bond between them. Frank would be proud, she says quietly, not just of exposing the truth, but of how you've honored his legacy while creating your own. Ray watches his son, thinking of the generations that connect them. The grandfather Alex never met, but whose moral courage now shapes his future. The properties Frank accumulated for evidence now fund a mission larger than one man's investigation. We build on what those before us began, Ray reflects. Frank understood that. It's why he preserved the evidence rather than seeking vengeance. He believed in institutions, even when they failed him. He believed they could be corrected, improved, held accountable. In the distance, the Washington Monument rises against the autumn sky, a reminder of the nation's aspirations and its ongoing struggle to realize them. The Blackwell investigation has exposed uncomfortable truths about power and corruption, but also revealed the resilience of systems designed to check that power when citizens demand accountability. Ray has declined numerous offers to write books or participate in documentaries. Instead, he's returned to what he knows, building maintenance and systems, though now as a security consultant, helping organizations protect their physical infrastructure against the kind of infiltration Frank mastered. As they drive away from Arlington, the Wilson family looks toward a future built on truth rather than secrets. Alex will grow up knowing the full measure of his grandfather's courage and his father's determination. The buildings that once housed evidence now serve communities. The legacy that began with one man's lonely crusade continues through a family's commitment to the principles he defended. Some battles for truth span generations. Some victories must be won again and again. But today, in this moment, justice has prevailed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to honor those who sacrificed to preserve it.